A black maid's unexpected call to a billionaire would change everything. But Clara Ndlova never imagined she'd be making that call at 2:47 a.m., her hands trembling as she pressed the numbers she'd memorized from the emergency contact list. The Sterling mansion stood silent around her, its marble floors cold beneath her bare feet. She'd been cleaning the West Wing when she heard them, hushed voices drifting through the ventilation system. Voices that didn't belong. "The old man sleeps heavy after his medication," one voice whispered. "We move at dawn. Victor says no witnesses." Clara's blood turned to ice. Old man. They meant Theodore Sterling, the 78-year-old patriarch who'd built a business empire worth $12 billion. The same man who'd given her this job when no one else would hire a single mother with a criminal record. She pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering. These weren't burglars looking for jewelry. This was something far worse. "You sure about the security codes?" another voice asked. "Victor gave them to us an hour ago. All cameras will go dark at 5 a.m. sharp." Victor Hale, the head of security who'd worked for the Sterling family for 15 years. The man Theodore trusted with his life. Clara's mind raced. She had to warn someone. But who? The local police would take too long to believe a Maid story about billionaire assassination plots. Theodore's wife had died 2 years ago. His daughter lived in London. That left Rowan Sterling, 34, the heir who'd never spoken more than 10 words to her in 3 years. The cold, calculating businessman who treated staff like furniture. The man who'd probably hang up the moment he heard her voice. But she had no choice. Clara slipped into the supply closet, her refuge during countless late shifts. Her phone screen glowed in the darkness as she scrolled to the number she'd saved but never dared use. The phone rang once, twice. This better be life or death. Rowan's voice cut through the silence, sharp with irritation. Clara's throat closed. She could picture him, probably in his penthouse apartment 40 minutes away, annoyed at being woken by an unknown caller. "Mr. Sterling, this is Clara. Clara Ndlova. I work at your father's estate." Silence stretched between them. She could almost hear his confusion. "The maid." His tone shifted from anger to bewilderment. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" "Sir, your father is in danger. Real danger. You need to listen to me." A harsh laugh echoed through the phone. "Is this some kind of joke? Did someone put you up to this?" Tears stung Clara's eyes. She'd expected this reaction, but it still cut deep. In his world, people like her didn't matter. Their warnings held no weight. "Mr. Sterling, please. I heard men talking. They're planning to hurt him. They said no witnesses. They're going to move at dawn." "Look, Clara," he paused, and she realized he was struggling to remember her name. "I don't know what kind of dream you had or what you think you heard, but my father has the best security money can buy. Victor Hale has protected our family for 15 years without incident." "That's just it," Clara whispered urgently. "Victor is the one behind this." The line went dead quiet. She could hear city sounds in the background, distant traffic, the hum of his expensive life continuing while hers hung in the balance. "That's impossible," Rowan said finally. "Victor saved my father's life twice. He's family. I know how it sounds. But I heard them mention his name. They have security codes. They know about the cameras. Sir, they're already in the house." Clara's voice cracked on the last word. Through the thin closet door, she could hear footsteps in the hallway. Heavy boots that didn't belong to any staff member. "Even if what you're saying is true," Rowan's voice remained skeptical. "Why call me? Why not the police?" "Because by the time they believe me, your father will be dead." The footsteps grew closer. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to muffle her breathing. "Where are you right now?" Rowan's tone had shifted. Still doubtful, but with an edge of concern. "Supply closet on the 3rd floor. Mr. Sterling, there are at least 4 of them. Maybe more. Armed. They're doing a sweep of the house before dawn. She heard him moving, the sound of keys jingling. I'm 40 minutes away, he said. If this is real. It is real. Clara's voice broke. They're going to kill him, and they're going to kill me if they find me. I have a 6-year-old daughter, Mr. Sterling. I wouldn't risk everything on a lie. Something in her voice must have convinced him. When he spoke again, the skepticism was gone. Stay hidden. Don't try to be a hero. I'm calling the police and heading there now. No police, Clara hissed. Not yet. Victor probably has contacts there. We need proof first. Then what do you suggest? The footsteps stopped right outside the closet door. Clara held her breath, watching the handle like it might turn into a weapon. Get here before dawn, she whispered, and pray we both live long enough to save him. The call ended just as the footsteps moved away. But Clara knew the truth. Victor Hale, the family's most trusted protector, was about to become their destroyer. If you were Clara, would you make this call? Subscribe to see what happens next. Rowan's Ferrari roared through empty city streets, its engine echoing off sleeping buildings. 38 minutes to the estate. His father's life hanging in the balance, dependent on the word of a maid he barely knew existed. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this was insane. Victor Hale had been like an uncle to him. The man had taught him to shoot, had been there for every birthday, every graduation. He'd taken bullets meant for the Sterling family. But Clara's voice haunted him. The raw terror in her words. The way she'd mentioned her 6-year-old daughter. Think Rowan, he muttered, taking a corner at dangerous speed. What if she's right? His phone buzzed. A text from Clara. They're moving. West Wing clear. Heading to your father's bedroom. Rowan's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. 29 minutes away. Meanwhile, 3 floors above Theodore Sterling's bedroom, Clara crept through corridors she'd cleaned 1,000 times. Now those familiar hallways felt like a maze of death. Every shadow could hide an assassin. Every creaking floorboard might give her away. She pressed against the wall, listening. Male voices drifted up from the main staircase. Teams 2 and 3, take positions. Remember, it has to look natural. Heart attack. Old man's been on medication for years. Clara's stomach churned. They weren't just planning murder. They were planning the perfect murder. She pulled out her phone, fingers shaking as she typed. Not shooting. Making it look like heart attack. Medicine involved. The response came immediately, 26 minutes out. Can you get to my father? Clara looked down the hallway toward Theodore's suite. 2 men in black tactical gear stood outside his door. Professional. Military trained. The kind of men who killed without hesitation. She typed back, guards at his door. Can't reach him. Her phone buzzed again, then get proof. Photos. Video. Anything. Proof. Clara almost laughed at the impossibility of it. She was a maid with a high school education, trying to outsmart professional killers. But then she thought of her daughter, Zoe, sleeping peacefully in their tiny apartment across town. If Clara died tonight, Zoe would grow up in the system, just like Clara had. That thought steeled her resolve. Clara remembered the security office on the 2nd floor. If these men had disabled the cameras, there might be evidence on the main server. Something to prove Victor's involvement. She moved like a ghost through the servants' passages, routes invisible to the main security system. Theodore Sterling had bought this mansion from old European nobility, complete with hidden corridors designed for staff to move unseen. 23 minutes. Rowan's phone rang as he blazed past a sleeping suburb. Clara's number. What's your status? He answered without greeting. I'm in the security office, Clara whispered. The system's been partially disabled, but I can see what happened earlier tonight. Rowan, her voice caught. Victor personally shut down the perimeter sensors at 1 a.m. He gave override codes to someone off-site. Rowan's world tilted. 15 years of trust, shattered in a single sentence. "There's more," Clara continued. "I found financial records in Victor's desk. Payments from Blackstone Industries. Isn't that your father's biggest competitor?" Cornelius Blackstone, Rowan breathed. His father's oldest rival. The man who'd lost billions when Theodore Sterling outmaneuvered him on 3 major deals. "Rowan, they're moving toward your father's room. I can hear them on the stairs. 21 minutes away. Too far. Too long. Get out of there, Clara. You've done enough." "No." Her voice hardened with determination. "I won't let them kill him. Not while I can still fight." The line went dead. Rowan pressed the accelerator to the floor, racing against time, against betrayal, against the darkness that threatened to consume everything he'd ever loved. Clara's heart stopped as footsteps echoed in the security office hallway. Heavy, deliberate steps she recognized instantly. Victor Hale walked like a man who owned the world, confident, measured, deadly. She killed the computer screen and slipped behind the massive filing cabinet just as the door handle turned. Through the narrow gap between metal and wall, she watched the man she'd trusted for 3 years step into the room. Victor looked nothing like the friendly security chief who'd always nodded politely at her in the corridors. Gone was the warm smile, the fatherly demeanor that had fooled an entire family. In its place stood a predator, his cold eyes scanning the room for any sign of disturbance. He moved to his desk with practiced silence, pulling out a secure phone she'd never seen before. Clara held her breath, pressing deeper into the shadows. "Phase 2 is active," Victor spoke into the device, his voice barely above a whisper. "The old man's medication has been adjusted. Natural causes, just like we discussed." Clara's stomach lurched. They hadn't just planned Theodore's murder. They'd already started it. "What about witnesses?" came a voice through the phone speaker. Victor's lips curved into something that might have been a smile on anyone else. On him, it looked like death itself. "The night staff is minimal. 1 maid on duty, but she'll be handled." He paused, checking his watch. "Rowan Sterling is 40 minutes away in the city. By the time he arrives for his usual monthly breakfast with Daddy, it'll all be over." Monthly breakfast. Clara realized with growing horror that they'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. They knew Rowan's schedule, Theodore's habits, even her cleaning rotation. "And the payment," Victor continued. 20 million hits your account the moment Theodore Sterling's death certificate is signed. Blackstone Industries sends their regards. $20 million. Victor was selling out 15 years of loyalty for money that wouldn't even dent Theodore's net worth. The betrayal cut deeper than Clara had imagined possible. Victor ended the call and moved toward the door, but stopped suddenly. His head tilted, nostrils flaring like an animal catching a scent. "Interesting," he murmured to himself. "Someone's been using this computer." Clara's blood turned to ice. She'd been careful, but not careful enough. The screen's saver timing, the chair position, something had given her away. Victor circled back to his desk, pulling up recent activity logs. His fingers flew across the keyboard with disturbing efficiency. "File access at 3:14 a.m., he read aloud. "Financial records. Security protocols." His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "Someone's been very busy tonight." He reached for his radio, and Clara knew she had seconds before the entire operation changed focus from Theodore to finding her. But as Victor raised the radio to his lips, another sound filled the night air, the distant roar of a high-performance engine pushing far beyond safe speeds. Rowan was coming. Victor's head snapped toward the window, calculating. Clara could see his mind working, weighing options, adjusting plans. "Change your strategy," he spoke into the radio. "We have unexpected complications. Move to Phase 3 immediately." Phase 3. Clara's heart sank as she realized their timeline had just accelerated. Whatever Victor had planned, it was happening now. Rowan's Ferrari screeched to a halt in the circular driveway, gravel spraying across manicured lawns that cost more to maintain than most people's homes. The Sterling mansion loomed before him, every window dark except for a faint glow from his father's study. At least he's alive, Rowan thought, though the relief lasted only seconds. He burst through the front doors, his footsteps echoing off marble floors that had witnessed 3 generations of Sterling family drama. Nothing, however, had prepared them for tonight. "Father." Rowan's voice boomed through the halls. "In here, son." Theodore's voice drifted from the study, calm and measured as always. The voice of a man who'd built empires through steady nerves and calculated risks. Rowan found his father exactly where he expected, behind the massive oak desk that had belonged to his grandfather, reading financial reports with the same intensity he'd shown for 40 years. Theodore Sterling at 78 looked every inch the billionaire patriarch. Silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, reading glasses perched on his nose, wearing a silk robe that cost more than most people's cars. "Dad, we need to leave. Now." Theodore looked up with a patient expression he'd perfected during Rowan's teenage years. "It's 3:30 in the morning, son. What's this about?" "Victor's trying to kill you." The words hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Theodore's expression didn't change. A lifetime of high-stakes business had taught him to never show surprise. "That's quite an accusation." Theodore set down his papers with deliberate care. "Based on what evidence?" "Clara called me. She overheard." "Clara?" Theodore's eyebrows rose. "The maid." The dismissal in his father's tone ignited something dangerous in Rowan's chest. "Yes, the maid. The woman who's been cleaning our family's messes for 3 years. She risked her life to warn us. Rowan, you drove 40 minutes through the night because of gossip from domestic staff." "It's not gossip." Rowan slammed his hand on the desk, causing Theodore's coffee cup to rattle. "She has proof. Financial records. Victor's been paid by Blackstone Industries." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Theodore's face. Cornelius Blackstone was the one enemy who'd never stopped fighting, never accepted defeat. "Even if that were true," Theodore said slowly, "Victor saved my life twice. He's family. Family doesn't take $20 million to murder you." Before Theodore could respond, the study door opened with practiced silence. Victor Hale stepped inside, his familiar smile firmly in place. But Rowan now saw it for what it truly was, a mask hiding a killer. "Everything all right, gentlemen?" Victor's voice carried its usual warmth. I heard raised voices. Rowan's hand instinctively moved toward the inside of his jacket, where he kept a concealed pistol. But Victor was faster, more experienced, and already positioned between them and the door. "Victor," Theodore said carefully, "Rowan seems to think you're plotting against our family." Victor's laugh sounded genuinely amused. "Plotting? Sir, I've dedicated 15 years of my life to protecting this family. I've taken bullets for you." "Show him the financial records," Rowan demanded. "What financial records?" Victor's expression remained perfectly calm, but his right hand had shifted slightly toward his holstered weapon. "The Blackstone payments. The security overrides from tonight." "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." Victor's voice remained steady, but his eyes had gone flat and cold. "Sir, I think your son might be having some kind of breakdown. The stress of the business, perhaps." Theodore looked between them, his sharp mind calculating probabilities, weighing loyalties against evidence he hadn't seen. "Where's Clara?" Rowan asked suddenly. "If she's lying, let's ask her directly." Victor's mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, a micro-expression that revealed everything Rowan needed to know. "I believe she finished her shift and went home," Victor said smoothly. But Rowan had seen the truth in that momentary slip. Clara hadn't gone home. She was still in the house, still in danger, and Victor knew exactly where she was. "You're lying," Rowan said quietly. Victor's hand moved to his weapon. "He's not lying about everything." The voice came from the study doorway, soft but steady. Clara stepped into the room, her cleaning uniform wrinkled, her dark eyes blazing with the kind of courage that only comes when you have nothing left to lose. Theodore Sterling's mouth fell open. In 3 years, he'd probably spoken fewer than 50 words to this woman. Now she stood in his private study at 3:30 a.m., interrupting a conversation that could determine his fate. "Clara," Rowan breathed, relief and terror warring in his voice. "I told you to get out. And let them kill the man who gave me a second chance." Clara's chin lifted with quiet dignity. "I don't think so." Victor's hand had frozen halfway to his weapon. 3 people in the room now, too many witnesses, too many variables. His carefully laid plans were crumbling, and everyone could see him calculating new angles. "Sir," Clara addressed Theodore directly, "I've worked in your home for 3 years. I've never once stepped out of line, never asked for special treatment, never caused you a moment's trouble. I'm asking you to trust me now." Theodore studied her with the same intensity he brought to billion-dollar deals. "You're risking your job, your freedom." "Why?" Clara's voice caught, and for a moment, the powerful emotions she'd been suppressing broke through. "Because your wife asked me to." The words hit Theodore like a physical blow. Elizabeth Sterling had been dead for 2 years, but her memory still ruled this house like a gentle ghost. "Your wife gave me this job when I got out of prison," Clara continued. "Said everyone deserved a second chance. Said family wasn't just about blood. It was about who stood by you when the world turned dark." Theodore's eyes glistened. Elizabeth had always been the moral compass of their family, the heart to his calculating brain. "She made me promise something before she died," Clara pressed on. "Made me swear I'd watch over this family, protect what she couldn't protect herself." "Stop." Victor's voice cut through the emotional moment like a blade. "This is very touching, but we have a situation to resolve." He drew his weapon in one fluid motion, pointing it directly at Clara's chest. "I really didn't want to do this the hard way," Victor said, his friendly mask finally falling away completely. The original plan was so much cleaner. Natural causes. No mess. No questions. Rowan started to move, but Victor shifted his aim toward Theodore. "Don't be a hero, son. One wrong move, and Daddy gets a bullet instead of a heart attack." Clara found herself staring down the barrel of a gun for the second time in her life. The first had been during the robbery that sent her to prison, a desperate attempt to feed her infant daughter that had destroyed her life. She'd sworn never to be helpless again. "You want to know why Elizabeth trusted me so much?" Clara asked, her voice steady despite the weapon pointed at her heart. Theodore nodded, unable to speak. "Because I told her the truth about why I went to prison. Not the official version. The real one." Victor's finger tightened on the trigger. Enough talking. But Clara wasn't finished. "I took the blame for someone else's crime. Someone who mattered more than my freedom. Your wife understood sacrifice, Mr. Sterling. She recognized it in me." The room fell silent except for the ticking of Theodore's antique clock. For lives balanced on the edge of violence, held in place by secrets, loyalties, and the memory of a woman who'd believed in second chances. Victor's radio crackled to life. "Phase 3 ready. Awaiting your signal." His eyes never left Clara's face as he smiled with genuine pleasure. "Signal confirmed," he said into the radio. "Light it up." 2 years earlier, Clara had stood in this same study, facing Elizabeth Sterling across the same oak desk. But that day, sunlight had streamed through tall windows, and the woman sitting across from her had been dying. "The cancer spread," Elizabeth had said simply, her voice carrying the grace that had made her a beloved figure in Philadelphia society. 3 months, maybe 6 if I'm stubborn." Clara had clutched her resume, A pathetic document listing 3 years in prison and a high school diploma earned behind bars. No one hired ex-convicts, especially not ex-convicts with theft convictions. Mrs. Sterling, I appreciate you seeing me, but tell me about your daughter. The question had caught Clara off guard. Employment agencies didn't ask about children. Potential employers certainly didn't start with personal questions. Zoe. She's 4. She's everything. Elizabeth's smile had been warm, genuine. I can see that. Tell me why you went to prison. Clara had rehearsed this conversation 100 times, but Elizabeth's direct approach shattered her prepared script. I stole from my employer, Clara said carefully. No. Elizabeth's voice had been gentle but firm. Tell me the real reason. Something in those kind eyes had broken down Clara's defenses. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the recognition of one mother speaking to another. But the truth had poured out. My brother Marcus was dealing drugs to pay for his son's cancer treatments. When the police raided his apartment, they found enough product to send him away for 20 years. Clara's voice had cracked with old pain. His boy was only 2. Same age as my Zoe. Elizabeth had listened without judgment as Clara explained the impossible choice she'd faced. Marcus had no record. I had a minor theft charge from when I was 17, desperate and stupid. We made a deal. I claimed the drugs were mine, took the plea bargain, served 3 years instead of his 20. And his son recovered completely. Marcus went back to school, became a nurse. He's saving lives now instead of destroying them. Elizabeth had been quiet for a long moment, studying Clara with eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. You sacrificed 3 years of your life, 3 years with your daughter, for a child who wasn't even yours. Family isn't just about blood, Clara had said, echoing words her grandmother had taught her. Sometimes it's about who you choose to protect. That phrase had lit something in Elizabeth's eyes. My husband thinks I'm hiring you because I feel sorry for you, Elizabeth had said finally. He's wrong. I'm hiring you because I recognize something in you that I see in myself. What's that, ma'am? The willingness to sacrifice everything for the people you love. Elizabeth had leaned forward, her voice taking on an urgent quality. Clara, I need you to understand something. When I'm gone, this family will be vulnerable. Theodore is brilliant with money, terrible with people. Rowan is strong but isolated. They'll need someone who understands loyalty, someone who knows what family really means. Clara had nodded, not fully understanding the weight of what Elizabeth was asking. Promise me, Elizabeth had whispered, her hand reaching across the desk to grasp Clara's. Promise me you'll watch over them, not as an employee, but as family. Promise me you'll protect what I can't protect myself. The promise had been easy to make then. Clara had imagined protecting them from grief, from loneliness, from the small cruelties of a world without Elizabeth's gentle influence. She'd never imagined protecting them from bullets. Now, standing in that same study with Victor's gun trained on her chest, Clara understood why Elizabeth had chosen her. Not for her cleaning skills or her desperate need for employment, but for the same quality that had sent her to prison in the first place, the absolute inability to abandon family, even when family wasn't bound by blood. Your wife saw something in me, Clara said to Theodore, her eyes never leaving Victor's face. She saw someone who would die before breaking a promise. Victor's finger moved to the trigger. Then let's test that theory. The gun wavered slightly in Victor's hand, and for the first time all night, real emotion cracked through his professional composure. You want to know the truth about loyalty? Victor's voice turned bitter. 15 years of suppressed resentment finally breaking free. I gave this family everything. My youth, my health, my own family. Theodore frowned. Genuine confusion replacing his earlier shock. Victor, what are you talking about? My wife left me because I was never home, always protecting you instead of her. My kids grew up calling me the stranger who lived in our house. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, school plays, all for the Sterling family. Clara watched Victor's face transform, seeing the pain beneath the betrayal. This wasn't just about money. This was about a man who'd sacrificed everything and received nothing but a salary in return. I saved your life twice, Victor continued, his gun hand shaking with emotion. Took bullets meant for you. And how did you repay me? By treating me like expensive furniture. 15 years, Theodore, and you never once asked about my family. Never invited me to your dinner parties. Never saw me as anything more than hired help. Rowan stepped forward slightly. Victor, that's not. Don't. Victor swung the gun toward him. You're the worst of all. Do you know how many times I had to listen to your father complain about you? His disappointment in his own son, while I stood there thinking I'd gladly trade places with you. The words hit Rowan like physical blows. His father's disappointment wasn't news, but hearing it voiced by an outsider made it feel fresh and raw. 3 months ago, Cornelius Blackstone approached me, Victor continued, his voice steadying as he fell back into professional mode. Offered me more money than I'd see in 3 lifetimes. But you know what really convinced me? He treated me with respect. Called me, sir. Asked about my retirement plans. Theodore's face had gone ashen. Victor, I had no idea you felt. Of course you didn't. Rich people never do. Victor's laugh held no humor. You know what the final straw was? Last Christmas, when you gave the entire staff bonuses. Everyone got a card with your wife's signature, printed, not handwritten. Everyone except me. I got a Rolex and a handshake. 15 years of loyalty. And you couldn't even pretend Elizabeth had personally thanked me. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered that Christmas, remembered Elizabeth staying up late, writing personal notes to every staff member. She died just 2 months later, and Clara had helped Theodore distribute the gifts according to her final wishes. Elizabeth did write you a note, Clara said softly. I watched her. She spent an hour on it, crying while she wrote, because she knew it would be her last Christmas with the staff. Victor's mask flickered. I never got any note. Because Theodore was supposed to give it to you personally, Clara continued, pieces falling into place. Along with something else Elizabeth wanted you to have. Theodore's face crumpled as understanding dawned. The safe. Her personal safe. I was supposed to. He trailed off, looking stricken. What was in the safe? Rowan demanded. Theodore's voice barely rose above a whisper. A letter recommending Victor for the head of security position at Sterling Industries corporate headquarters. A 50% salary increase. A retirement package worth $2 million. He looked at Victor with genuine remorse. She wanted to promote you to family, Victor. Make you a true partner, not just an employee. The gun in Victor's hand trembled as this revelation hit him. You're lying, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The radio, Clara said suddenly, remembering Victor's earlier communication. Who else is involved? This isn't just about Blackstone anymore. Victor's expression hardened again, the moment of vulnerability passing. Let's just say some very powerful people have been waiting a long time for Theodore Sterling to disappear. The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. Victor's confession hung in the air, mixing betrayal with tragedy, greed with genuine pain. But words wouldn't stop bullets, and everyone in the room knew the talking was over. Theodore started to rise from his chair. Victor, please. We can fix this. Elizabeth's wishes can still. It's too late for that, Victor said, raising the gun with deadly intent. That's when Rowan moved. 15 years of martial arts training kicked in as he lunged across the study, aiming for Victor's gun hand. But Victor had trained killers for a living. His reflexes were honed by years of real combat, not expensive lessons at elite gyms. Victor pivoted smoothly, bringing his elbow up to catch Rowan in the ribs, while simultaneously pulling a knife from his belt with his free hand. The gun stayed trained on Theodore, but the blade swept toward Rowan's throat with lethal precision. Clara didn't think. She moved. Her foot connected with Victor's wrist, just as the knife reached Rowan's neck. The blade went flying, clattering across the marble floor and sliding under Theodore's bookshelf. Victor roared in pain and fury, his carefully controlled demeanor finally shattering completely. "You stupid," Victor spun toward Clara, backhanding her across the face with enough force to send her stumbling into the wall. Pain exploded across Clara's cheek, but she'd felt worse. Prison had taught her how to take a hit and keep fighting. More importantly, it had taught her that survival sometimes meant making the hardest choices. Rowan used Victor's momentary distraction to tackle him around the waist. Both men went down hard, the gun skittering across the floor. Theodore scrambled to retrieve it, his 78-year-old body moving with surprising speed. But Victor wasn't finished. He drove his knee up into Rowan's stomach, forcing him to double over, gasping. Then Victor rolled, coming up in a crouch with the deadly grace of a predator. 15 years I protected this family, Victor snarled, wiping blood from his split lip. 15 years I was the best security chief money could buy. You think some rich boy and a maid can take me down? He pulled a backup pistol from an ankle holster, the mark of a true professional who always had contingencies. Clara dove for Theodore as Victor's finger found the trigger. The bullet meant for the elderly billionaire buried itself in the oak paneling behind his chair, sending splinters flying like shrapnel. "Nobody leaves this room alive," Victor said, advancing on them with methodical precision. The original plan would have been cleaner, but this works too. Home invasion gone wrong. Tragic, but believable. Rowan struggled to his feet, still winded from the knee strike. The police will never believe it. Too many coincidences. Victor's smile was cold as winter. The police will believe what the evidence tells them, and I control the evidence. That's when Clara realized the true scope of Victor's betrayal. As head of security, he controlled not just the physical protection of the estate, but the cameras, the alarms, the digital footprint of everything that happened here. He could edit their deaths into any story he chose. "The radio communications you heard," Victor continued, reading her expression. "My team isn't just here to kill Theodore. They're here to stage the perfect crime scene." Theodore had managed to retrieve the first gun, but his hands were shaking too badly to aim properly. A lifetime of boardroom battles hadn't prepared him for actual warfare. "Dad, give me the gun," Rowan said, his voice steady despite the blood trickling from his split lip. "Touch that weapon, and I put a bullet in the old man's head," Victor warned, his own gun now trained on Theodore's heart. "In fact, let's make this simple. Everyone on their knees, hands behind your heads." Clara looked at Rowan, then at Theodore. Three people who'd lived separate lives until tonight, now bound together by circumstances none of them could have imagined. "Do it," Theodore said quietly. "He's won." But as they began to kneel, Victor's radio crackled to life with an urgent voice. "All units, we have a problem. Multiple police vehicles approaching the estate. ETA 3 minutes. Victor's eyes widened in genuine surprise. Someone had called for backup. "Impossible," Victor breathed, his gun wavering between the three kneeling figures. No one else knew about tonight. But Theodore Sterling's expression had changed. The defeated old man was gone, replaced by the razor-sharp businessman who'd built an empire through calculated moves and hidden strategies. "You're right, Victor," Theodore said calmly. No one else knew about tonight's specific plan. Rowan stared at his father in confusion. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Theodore slowly reached into his robe pocket, ignoring Victor's sharp command to freeze. Instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small recording device. "But I've known about the general threat for weeks," Theodore continued. "Corporate espionage is part of the business, son. You don't survive 40 years in this industry without learning to watch your back." Victor's face went white. "You couldn't have known. The plan was perfect. The plan was obvious once I started looking." Theodore's voice carried the confidence of a man who'd outmaneuvered competitors worth billions. Cornelius Blackstone's been trying to destroy me for 20 years. When my private investigators told me he'd approached my head of security, I knew exactly what he was planning. Clara felt the world tilt around her. You knew Victor was going to betray you? Theodore's eyes filled with genuine sadness as he looked at Victor. I knew someone was feeding information to Blackstone Industries. Bank account irregularities, security protocol changes, suspicious meetings. I prayed it wasn't you. Then, why didn't you stop it? Rowan's voice cracked with disbelief and anger. Why let it get this far? For the first time since Clara had known him, Theodore Sterling looked his full 78 years. The weight of his choices, his manipulations, his failures as a father and employer pressed down on him visibly. Because I wanted proof, Theodore admitted. And because... He paused, swallowing hard. Because I wanted to understand why. Victor had been like family to me. I needed to know what had driven him to this. Victor laughed bitterly. Family? You just admitted you've been spying on me for weeks. Setting traps, recording conversations. That's how you treat family. I treated you exactly how I treat everyone, Theodore said quietly. Like a business asset to be managed and monitored. Elizabeth tried to tell me that was wrong, but I never listened. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Rowan stared at his father with a mixture of admiration and revulsion. You used us as bait, Rowan said slowly. Clara, me, yourself. We were all just pieces in your game to catch Victor. No. Theodore's voice turned urgent. You were never supposed to be involved. Clara's call wasn't part of any plan. When she warned you, when you came here tonight, you changed everything. Clara felt sick. The police sirens. You called them before any of this started. I have a panic button in my desk drawer, Theodore confirmed. Silent alarm directly to a private security firm. I activated at the moment Victor entered this room with his weapon drawn. Victor's tactical radio crackled again. Control, this is team leader. Police are surrounding the estate. Orders. Victor looked at the radio, then at Theodore, then at the recording device still running in the old man's hands. You recorded my confession, Victor realized. Everything I said about Blackstone, about the money, about the plan. Every word, Theodore confirmed. But instead of defeat, Victor's expression shifted to something far more dangerous. Then you've left me with nothing to lose, he said, raising his gun toward Theodore's heart. That's when the lights went out. The Sterling mansion plunged into absolute blackness as every light, every electronic device, every security system died simultaneously. Emergency generators that should have kicked in remained silent, leaving them in darkness, so complete it felt solid. Backup plan. Victor's voice floated through the black void, calm and professional once more. When all else fails, control the battlefield. Clara pressed herself against the floor, remembering lessons from her grandmother about surviving dangerous situations. Stay low, stay quiet, listen for everything. She could hear Theodore's labored breathing somewhere to her left. Rowan's sharp intake of air came from near the desk. But Victor had gone silent, moving with the practiced stealth of a man trained to kill in any conditions. Electromagnetic pulse device. Victor's voice came from a different location now, proving he was circling them like a predator. Kills everything electronic within a half-mile radius. No cameras, no phones, no police radios. Just us and the darkness. A crash of glass echoed through the study as someone, Rowan, probably, knocked over a lamp trying to move. Careful, son. Victor's voice carried dark amusement. Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself before I get to you. Clara began crawling toward where she thought the door might be, her hands feeling along the familiar carpet. 3 years of cleaning this room had taught her its layout, but darkness changed everything. Distance became fluid. Direction became guesswork. You know what the beautiful thing about darkness is? Victor continued his psychological warfare. It makes everyone equal. Rich, poor, powerful, helpless. We're all just meat stumbling around in the black. The sound of footsteps on marble told Clara that Victor had moved into the hallway. She could hear him systematically checking rooms, hunting them with methodical precision. Theodore. Rowan's voice whispered from somewhere near the window. Can you reach the panic button again? Dead, came Theodore's shaky reply. Everything's dead. Clara's hand found something metallic under the bookshelf. Victor's knife, the one she'd kicked away during their first struggle. Her fingers closed around the handle, and for the second time in her life, she prepared to use a weapon in self-defense. Clara. Rowan's whisper was barely audible. Where are you? Here, she breathed back, then realized Victor could hear them too. The footsteps stopped. Marco, Victor called out playfully. Polo. A gunshot exploded through the darkness, muzzle flash illuminating the study for a split second. Clara saw Rowan diving behind the desk, Theodore pressed against the far wall, and Victor standing in the doorway with his weapon raised. Missed, Victor said conversationally. But I have plenty of bullets. Clara made her choice. Instead of hiding, she moved toward the sound of Victor's voice, knife held low and ready. Prison had taught her that sometimes the only way out was through. Another gunshot. This time, Theodore cried out in pain. Dad. Rowan's voice cracked with anguish. Just a graze, Theodore called back, but Clara could hear the pain in his voice. Shoulder. Victor's laughter echoed through the darkness. One down. 2 to go. But as Victor moved to finish what he'd started, Clara struck from behind, driving the knife toward where she thought his kidney would be. The blade met Kevlar body armor instead of flesh, but the impact was enough to throw off his aim. Victor spun, firing wildly. The muzzle flash revealed Clara's face for an instant, determined, fearless, absolutely committed to her promise to Elizabeth Sterling. You should have stayed in prison, Victor snarled. The next gunshot came from outside the study. Then screaming. Then silence. What happens next? The screaming had come from Victor's tactical team outside. Someone, or something, had gotten to them first. But that mystery would have to wait, because Victor Hale was still very much alive and hunting in the darkness of the Sterling mansion. Clara crouched behind Theodore's massive desk, the knife trembling in her grip. She could hear Victor moving through the study, his breathing controlled and predatory. Somewhere in the blackness, Rowan was trying to help his wounded father, their whispered conversation barely audible. But Clara had found something else during her desperate crawling, a small glass vial that had rolled under the desk during their earlier struggle. Her fingers traced its surface, recognizing it instantly. Insulin, Theodore's emergency medication, kept in his desk drawer for diabetic episodes. In the right dose, it was life-saving medicine. In the wrong dose, it was deadly poison. Clara's mind raced through impossible calculations. One injection could stop Victor permanently. No more threats, no more bullets flying through the darkness. She had the element of surprise, the knowledge of exactly where he was based on his breathing. But using it would make her a killer. Prison had taught her that some lines, once crossed, change you forever. She'd watched women who'd entered as petty thieves leave as hardened criminals, their souls carved hollow by choices they couldn't take back. Yet Victor had already shot Theodore. He'd promised to kill them all. He had backup plans, escape routes, and the training to execute them. Could courage and voice really stop a professional assassin? What would you do in her shoes? The insulin felt heavy in her palm, heavier than any weapon she'd ever held. One choice could save 3 lives. Another choice could preserve her soul. I know you're in here. Victor's voice floated through the darkness, closer now. All 3 of you breathing like frightened rabbits. Clara heard the distinctive sound of a fresh magazine clicking into place. Victor was reloading, methodical even in chaos. You know what I learned in 15 years of security work? Victor continued his psychological warfare. The difference between survivors and victims isn't training or weapons. It's the willingness to do what others won't. A floorboard creaked near Theodore's position. Found you, old man. Clara had seconds to decide. Voice or vial. Courage or calculated murder. The choice that would define not just this moment, but the rest of her life. She thought of her daughter Zoe, sleeping peacefully across town. What kind of mother did she want to be? What kind of woman did she want Zoe to remember? Then she thought of Elizabeth Sterling's last words to her. Protect what I can't protect myself. Clara made her choice. She stood up in the darkness, knife clattering to the floor, and spoke in the strongest voice she could manage. Victor, stop. You're better than this. Victor's laughter cut through the air like breaking glass. Better? Clara, I'm exactly what this family made me. No, Clara said, moving toward his voice with steady steps. You're what pain made you. But pain doesn't have to win. The silence stretched between them, broken only by Theodore's labored breathing and Rowan's whispered prayers. Comment below what you would do in Clara's shoes, and subscribe to see her decision. Clara's words hung in the darkness like a challenge to everything Victor had become. For a moment, just one heartbeat, she thought she'd reached him. Thought 15 years of shared history, of mutual respect, might overcome the poison of betrayal and greed. Then Victor's muzzle flash lit up the study like lightning. The bullet whistled past Clara's ear, so close she felt the heat. She dove sideways, crashing into Theodore's leather reading chair, as Victor's professional calm finally cracked completely. You think you understand me? Victor roared, firing again. You think some inspirational speech changes 15 years of humiliation. But the gunshots had given away his position. Rowan launched himself from behind the desk, tackling Victor around the waist in a desperation move that had everything to do with courage and nothing to do with technique. Both men crashed into the bookshelf, ancient leather-bound volumes cascading down like literary rain. Victor's gun spun away into the darkness, but his combat training kicked in immediately. He drove an elbow into Rowan's ribs, then grabbed the younger man's throat with practiced precision. Rich boy thinks he's a fighter, Victor snarled, applying pressure to Rowan's windpipe. Let me show you what real violence looks like. Clara heard Rowan choking, heard his feet kicking frantically against the marble floor. She scrambled through the darkness, hands searching for anything that could help. The gun, the knife, anything. Instead, she found Theodore. The elderly patriarch had pulled himself upright against the wall, his wounded shoulder dark with blood. But his eyes, even in the darkness, Clara could see the fierce intelligence that had built an empire burning bright. Victor, Theodore's voice cut through the struggle with surprising strength. You forgot something important. Victor's grip on Rowan's throat loosened slightly. What's that, old man? I didn't survive 40 years in business without learning to fight dirty. Theodore pressed something small and metallic against his mouth, a whistle, Clara realized, probably from his desk drawer. The piercing shriek that emerged could have woken the dead. But more importantly, it activated the estate's emergency protocol. Silent alarms don't need electricity, Theodore gasped. Mechanical backup systems. The whistle triggers a manual relay to the security company. They've been en route since the lights went out. Victor's curse was creative and profane. He released Rowan, who collapsed to the floor gasping, and lunged toward Theodore with murder in his eyes. That's when Clara found Victor's dropped pistol. Stop, she commanded, the weapon heavy and unfamiliar in her hands. Victor froze, calculating distances, angles, probabilities. You won't shoot, he said with deadly certainty. You're not a killer, Clara. That's what makes you weak. Maybe, Clara admitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. But I'm a mother, and mothers will do anything to protect their family. The word family hit the air like a physical blow. Not the Sterling's family, her family. The makeshift, chosen family of people who'd stood together against the darkness. Through the shattered windows, the sound of approaching sirens grew stronger. Real police this time, not Victor's accomplices. Victor's smile was cold as winter death. "You have no idea what you've interfered with tonight," he said. "I'm just one small piece of something much larger, much more dangerous." Will the guard arrive in time? The sirens weren't just getting closer, they were multiplying. What had started as a distant wail became a symphony of emergency vehicles converging on the Sterling estate. Red and blue lights began strobing through the broken windows, painting the devastated study in alternating colors of danger and salvation. Victor's expression shifted from rage to cold calculation as he heard car doors slamming, tactical boots hitting gravel, radio chatter coordinating entry points. "Hands where we can see them." The voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is Philadelphia Police Emergency Response." But Victor wasn't finished. Even with a gun pointed at his chest, even with the walls closing in, he moved with the fluid grace of a predator who'd never been truly cornered. "Last chance, Clara," he said, taking a step toward her. "Pull that trigger or watch everyone you care about die." Clara's finger found the trigger, but 15 years of legal troubles had taught her the difference between self-defense and murder. Victor wasn't attacking. He was threatening. The law wouldn't protect her if she shot an unarmed man. That hesitation was all Victor needed. He dove sideways just as the study door exploded inward. Philadelphia's finest poured through the opening, tactical gear, assault rifles, enough firepower to stop a small war. Their flashlights cut through the darkness like swords, illuminating the chaos that had consumed the Sterling family's sanctuary. "Drop your weapons." The lead officer's voice brooked no argument. "Everyone on the ground, now." Clara immediately placed the pistol on the floor and raised her hands. Rowan, still gasping from Victor's chokehold, managed to comply. Theodore slumped against the wall, his face gray with blood loss, but alive. But Victor used the confusion to his advantage. As officers spread throughout the room, shouting commands and assessing threats, he grabbed Clara from behind, his arms snaking around her throat in a perfect chokehold. "I want safe passage," Victor called out, using Clara as a human shield. "Or the Maid dies." The tactical team's weapons swung toward them, red laser dots dancing across Victor's exposed limbs. Professional voices called for clear shots, negotiation protocols, backup units. "Let her go, Victor," the lead negotiator said calmly. "This doesn't have to end badly for anyone." Victor's laugh was bitter. "It already ended badly. You just don't know it yet." Clara felt his grip tighten around her throat, cutting off her air supply. But she also felt something else, the small insulin vial, still clutched in her left hand from her earlier choice. "You think catching me stops anything?" Victor continued, backing toward the shattered windows. "I'm nobody. A contractor. Expendable." The negotiator kept his voice level. "Then help us catch the people who matter. Make a deal." "There is no deal," Victor said. "There are only consequences." And the Sterling family just guaranteed themselves a lifetime of looking over their shoulders. That's when Clara made her move. Instead of fighting Victor's chokehold, she went limp, dead weight that threw off his balance for just an instant, long enough to drive the insulin vial into his thigh and press the plunger. Victor roared in pain and fury, releasing her to grab at the injection site. Clara rolled away as tactical officers swarmed him, weapons trained on center mass. "Don't move," they shouted. "Stay down." But Victor was already feeling the effects of the massive insulin dose. His movements became sluggish, his vision blurry. As handcuffs clicked around his wrists, he looked directly at Clara with eyes that promised retribution. "This isn't over," he whispered, his voice already slurring from the insulin shock. "The people I work for, they don't forgive interference. They don't forget witnesses." As paramedics rushed in to treat Theodore's gunshot wound and counter the insulin overdose that would save Victor's life while ensuring his capture, Clara realized the terrible truth. They'd won tonight's battle, but the war was just beginning. Dawn broke over the Sterling estate like a gentle promise after the longest night of their lives. Police cars still dotted the circular driveway. Crime scene investigators still cataloged evidence, and paramedics still fussed over Theodore's shoulder wound. But for the first time in hours, the mansion felt safe. Clara sat on the front steps, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of hope. Her face bore the bruises of Victor's backhanded slap. Her uniform was torn and bloodstained. But she was alive. They were all alive. Rowan emerged from the house, his throat still bearing finger-shaped bruises from Victor's chokehold. He moved carefully, like a man learning to trust solid ground again. "How's your father?" Clara asked. "Stubborn as ever, arguing with the doctors about leaving for an important meeting." Rowan's smile held exhaustion but genuine warmth. Some things never change. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd shared hell and somehow found their way back. The class differences that had defined their relationship for 3 years seemed ridiculous now, dissolved by shared trauma and mutual respect. "I need to ask you something," Rowan said finally. "Why didn't you use the insulin as a weapon earlier? I saw you holding it, saw you making the choice." Clara touched the small puncture wound on her palm where she'd accidentally stuck herself while injecting Victor. "Because that's not who I want to be. Not who Elizabeth wanted me to be. Even if it meant we might die. Especially then." Clara's voice carried quiet conviction. "My daughter's going to grow up in a world where people choose violence first and ask questions later. I wanted her to have at least one example of someone who chose differently." Rowan studied her profile, seeing Claren Blovu clearly for perhaps the first time. Not the invisible maid, not the ex-convict, but the woman who'd risked everything to save people who'd barely acknowledged her existence. "The police want statements from all of us," he said. "Formal interviews, probably testimony if this goes to trial." "I know." Clara had already spoken with the detectives, told them everything about Victor's confession, Blackstone Industries, the larger conspiracy he'd hinted at. "I'm not going anywhere." "Actually," Rowan paused, choosing his words carefully, "I was hoping you might consider going somewhere. Specifically, upstairs to the East Wing." Clara frowned in confusion. "I don't understand." "Those are the family quarters. Private rooms, not staff areas." Rowan's voice grew stronger, more certain. "I talked to my father while the paramedics were treating him. We want to offer you Elizabeth's old suite. Not as an employee, but as family." The word hung between them, heavy with implications that would have seemed impossible 12 hours ago. "The head of household security position is going to be vacant," Rowan continued. "Corporate security, executive protection, threat assessment. It comes with a salary that would let you buy your own house, send your daughter to any college she wants." Clara felt tears threatening for the first time since the nightmare began. "Rowan, I can't." "You can. You risked your life to honor a promise to my mother. Let us honor a promise to you." Through the mansion's windows, Clara could see Theodore Sterling being wheeled toward an ambulance, still arguing with medical personnel about his schedule. Their eyes met across the distance, and the old man nodded once, a gesture of respect, acknowledgement, and invitation. "Elizabeth saw something in you that took the rest of us too long to recognize," Rowan said. "You're not just staff, Clara. You never were. You're the conscience this family forgot we needed." As the ambulance pulled away and crime scene investigators continued their work, Clara made another choice that would define the rest of her life. This time, she chose family. 3 days after the attack, Clara found herself in a place she'd never imagined. Sitting across from Theodore Sterling in his private hospital room, not as his maid, but as his newly appointed head of security. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The FBI finished their preliminary investigation of Victor's finances, Theodore said, adjusting the sling that held his wounded arm. $20 million from Blackstone Industries, just like you overheard. But that's not the disturbing part. Clara leaned forward, her new security clearance giving her access to information that would have been unthinkable days ago. What did they find? The money trail goes deeper. Blackstone was funding Victor. Yes, but Victor was funding others. Shell companies, offshore accounts, payments to people we haven't identified yet. Theodore's voice dropped to a whisper. Clara, we may have stopped one assassin, but we haven't stopped the assassination. The words hit her like ice water. She'd thought capturing Victor would end the threat, that the Sterling family could finally breathe safely again. Instead, they'd only peeled back the first layer of something much more sinister. How many others? Clara asked. We don't know. The FBI is tracking financial connections, but some of these accounts have been active for years. This wasn't a simple murder-for-hire scheme. This was a long-term operation to destroy the Sterling family completely. Clara thought about Victor's final words, his promise that consequences would follow. She dismissed it as the ranting of a defeated man, but now it felt like prophecy. There's something else, Theodore continued, pulling out a folder marked classified. Victor's psychological evaluation from federal custody. The psychiatrist thinks he was telling the truth about feeling unappreciated, about the personal grievances. But the timeline doesn't match. What do you mean? Victor was contacted by Blackstone 3 months ago, but the financial records show he'd been researching our family's vulnerabilities for over a year. Someone else recruited him first. Blackstone was just the highest bidder. Clara felt the room temperature drop. You're saying there's a puppet master we haven't found. I'm saying Victor was never the mastermind. He was middle management in someone else's war against our family. The implications crashed over Clara like a wave. Every assumption they'd made, every moment of relief they'd felt, had been built on incomplete information. Victor's capture hadn't ended anything. It had simply forced their real enemies to adapt. The question, Theodore said, studying Clara's face, is what we do with this knowledge. Do we wait for them to make the next move, or do we go hunting? Clara thought of her daughter Zoe, safely staying with Clara's sister while the immediate danger passed. She thought of Elizabeth Sterling's final request to protect this family. She thought of the promise she'd made in that darkened study 3 nights ago. We hunt, she said without hesitation. Theodore's smile was sharp as a blade. I was hoping you'd say that, because I have some ideas about who might want our family destroyed badly enough to spend years planning it. Who? People we've crossed in business. People who lost fortunes when we succeeded. People who believe the Sterling family has gotten away with too much for too long. Who else is plotting against the family? The question hung between them like a challenge, promising answers that might be more dangerous than the ignorance they were leaving behind. Rowan stood in the Sterling Industries corporate boardroom, studying the faces of 12 people he trusted with his family's billion-dollar empire. Now, after Victor's betrayal, every familiar smile looked like a potential mask. Every loyal gesture felt like possible deception. The quarterly reports show unusual patterns, he announced, watching for reactions. Someone has been accessing confidential files, copying sensitive data. The FBI believes it's connected to the attempt on my father's life. Board member Patricia chin shifted uncomfortably. CFO Marcus Webb adjusted his tie. General Counsel Rita Morrison made careful notes. Any of them could be the inside source feeding information to their enemies. Are you suggesting one of us is involved? Asked Webb, his voice carrying just the right amount of indignation. I'm not suggesting anything, Rowan replied coldly. I'm stating facts. Someone with executive access has been selling our secrets. Someone in this room might be planning our destruction. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. These were people who'd worked alongside his father for decades, who'd attended family dinners, who'd sent flowers when his mother died. But Victor had done all those things too. After the meeting dissolved into uncomfortable murmurs and suspicious glances, Clara appeared at Rowan's elbow. How did it go? She asked. Like watching 12 people try not to look guilty while probably at least one of them actually is guilty. Rowan loosened his tie, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. How do you know who to trust when betrayal comes from the people closest to you? Clara understood that feeling intimately. She'd trusted her brother Marcus completely, enough to go to prison for him. She'd trusted her daughter's father enough to believe his promises of forever, right up until he disappeared when the pregnancy test turned positive. Trust, once broken, never quite healed the same way. You don't, Clara said simply. You trust anyway, but you verify everything. That's not very comforting. It's not supposed to be comforting. It's supposed to keep you alive. They walked through the corporate corridors where Clara had never set foot as a maid, but now moved freely as head of security. The transformation felt surreal, like wearing someone else's life. I keep thinking about what my father said, Rowan continued, about treating people like business assets instead of human beings. What if that's why this is happening? What if we created our own enemies through arrogance? Clara, stop walking. Rowan, you can't take responsibility for other people's choices to commit murder. Victor chose greed over loyalty. Whoever's behind this conspiracy chose destruction over competition. Those are their sins, not yours. But what if? What if nothing? Clara's voice carried the authority of someone who'd faced her own guilt and survived it. You can learn from your father's mistakes without carrying the weight of other people's evil. Looking at her, Rowan realized Clara had become more than his head of security, more than his family's protector. She'd become his conscience, the voice of moral clarity in a world gone mad with betrayal and suspicion. The question was, would that be enough to save them all? The federal holding facility in downtown Philadelphia looked like every other government building, gray concrete, small windows, the kind of place where hope went to die. Clara hadn't wanted to visit Victor Hale, but the FBI agent had been insistent. He asked for you specifically, Agent Rodriguez explained as they walked through security checkpoints. Won't talk to anyone else. Claims he has information about future threats against your family. Clara felt her stomach clench. 3 weeks had passed since that terrible night. 3 weeks of slowly believing they might be safe. Now Victor was dangling new nightmares like bait. The interview room was exactly what she'd expected. White walls, metal table, chairs bolted to the floor. Victor sat waiting in an orange jumpsuit, but his posture remained unnaturally calm. Prison hadn't broken him. If anything, he looked more dangerous in captivity than he had with a gun. Clara. His smile was genuine, almost friendly. You look good. The promotion suits you. What do you want, Victor? To help you. Victor leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed despite the handcuffs. You stopped me from killing Theodore, but you didn't stop the larger operation. In fact, you might have made it worse. Agent Rodriguez activated the recording device. Explain. The people I was working for, the real architects of this plan, they don't appreciate interference. My failure has forced them to accelerate their timeline and expand their methods. Clara felt ice forming in her veins. What methods? Victor's smile widened. Murder was always Plan B. Plan A was much more elegant, financial destruction. Bankrupting the Sterling family through corporate sabotage, market manipulation, strategic acquisitions designed to create cascading failures. That's impossible, Clara said. The Sterling Empire is worth billions. Was worth billions. Victor's voice carried dark satisfaction. Check your stock prices this morning. Check your major contracts. Check your banking relationships. Agent Rodriguez was already pulling out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. His expression grew increasingly grim as he scrolled through financial news. Sterling Industries down 18% in pre-market trading, he read aloud. 3 major contracts terminated overnight. Banking consortium calling an emergency review of credit facilities. Victor's laughter filled the small room. You see? While you were celebrating my capture, my employers were executing the real attack. Financial warfare, perfectly legal and completely devastating. Clara's hands clenched into fists. Who's behind this? People with longer memories than you might expect. People who believe Theodore Sterling has been getting away with destroying lives for decades. People who want to watch him lose everything before he dies. Names, Agent Rodriguez demanded. Victor shook his head, still smiling. Names are earned, not given. But I'll tell you this much, they've been planning this for 5 years. My assassination attempt was supposed to be the final blow after the financial attack crippled the family. Since that failed, they're going to ruin you slowly instead. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. They want Theodore Sterling to watch his empire crumble, watch his son lose everything, watch his legacy turn to ash. And Clara? They blame you for forcing them to get creative. The recording device captured every chilling word, every promise of destruction yet to come. The Sterling Industries war room had been hastily converted from a conference space into a crisis command center. Wall-mounted screens displayed stock prices, contract statuses, media coverage, and financial projections that painted an increasingly dire picture. Clara stood beside Rowan, both of them studying the evidence of systematic corporate sabotage with the intensity of generals planning a counterattack. 18 companies have terminated contracts in the past 72 hours, Rowan said, his voice steady despite the catastrophic numbers. Banking relationships frozen pending routine reviews that could take months. Media outlets running coordinated stories about our family's questionable business practices dating back decades. Clara traced patterns on the digital displays, her security training helping her see connections others might miss. This isn't random corporate opportunism. Look at the timing. Every cancellation, every negative story, every banking delay happened within a 6-hour window. Someone coordinated this like a military operation. Theodore entered the room, his arms still in a sling, but his expression sharp as steel. Despite his physical limitations, he moved with a commanding presence that had built an empire. Legal says we're looking at potential bankruptcy within 6 months if this continues, he announced without preamble. Not because we lack assets, but because we lack liquidity. They're choking off our cash flow while simultaneously devaluing our holdings. It's brilliant, Rowan admitted grudgingly. Destroy us financially, then buy our assets at fire sale prices. They get everything we built, and we end up with nothing. Clara studied the timeline of attacks, looking for weaknesses in their enemy strategy. Victor said they'd been planning this for 5 years. That means they've been positioning themselves, gathering intelligence, compromising relationships long before the assassination attempt. Which means, Theodore said slowly, some of our most trusted business partners have been working against us for years. The implications hit all 3 of them simultaneously. This wasn't just about external enemies. This was about corruption that reached into the heart of the Sterling business empire. We need to identify every person with access to the information used in these attacks, Clara said, slipping into tactical planning mode. Contract details, banking relationships, media contacts, internal communications. Cross-reference that with Victor's financial records and look for patterns. Rowan pulled up personnel files on the main screen. Hundreds of people have had access to various pieces of this puzzle. Executive assistants, department heads, board members, legal counsel. Start with board members, Theodore interrupted. The scope of this attack requires someone with comprehensive knowledge of our entire operation. Someone who's been in our inner circle for years. Clara felt the familiar chill of recognition. Someone who attended family dinners. Someone who sent flowers when your wife died. Someone you trusted completely. Just like Victor, Rowan said quietly. They worked in focused silence for the next hour, building profiles, tracking financial connections, identifying potential traders hidden within their own organization. The evidence painted a picture of betrayal so systematic, so comprehensive, that Clara began to understand the true scope of what they were facing. We're not just fighting corporate sabotage, she said finally. We're fighting a conspiracy that's been growing inside the Sterling family business for half a decade. Theodore's smile was coldly satisfied. Then it's time to perform some surgery. Subscribe now to follow their next move. This story is far from over. The breakthrough came at 2 a.m. when Clara was cross-referencing Victor's prison phone logs with the Sterling family's private calendar from the past 5 years. What she found made her blood run cold. Every major family event, birthdays, anniversaries, Elizabeth's funeral, Rowan's business trips, had been followed within 48 hours by suspicious financial activity in Victor's accounts. Someone had been feeding him real-time intelligence about the family's movements, vulnerabilities, and emotional states. But the phone logs revealed something even more disturbing. Victor's most frequent contact wasn't Cornelius Blackstone or any known enemy. It was a number registered to Sterling Industries' own legal department. Clara stared at the evidence spread across her desk, pieces of a puzzle that painted a picture too horrifying to accept. The calls had started 3 years ago, right after Elizabeth's cancer diagnosis became known to the family's inner circle. She pulled up the employee directory, cross-referencing the phone number with personnel records. When the name appeared on her screen, Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Rita Morrison, General Counsel, 22 years with the company, present at every board meeting, privy to every family secret, trusted with the most sensitive legal matters. The woman who'd sat in that boardroom 3 days ago, taking careful notes while Rowan announced the investigation. The woman who'd expressed shock and concern about the possibility of a traitor in their midst. Clara's hands trembled as she pulled up Rita's financial records, her security clearance giving her access to information that revealed the scope of the betrayal. Offshore accounts, shell companies, payments that coincided perfectly with major Sterling Industries decisions. But the most damning evidence was a series of property purchases dating back for years. Rita Morrison owned a significant stake in 3 companies that had just terminated contracts with Sterling Industries. She'd been positioning herself to profit from the family's destruction long before Victor ever pulled a gun. The phone on Clara's desk rang, startling her from the horrifying revelations. The caller ID showed Rita Morrison's direct line. Clara, Rita's familiar voice, sounded concerned, maternal even. "I know it's late, but I wanted to check on you. This investigation must be taking a toll." Clara forced her voice to remain steady. "I'm fine, Rita. Just working through some financial records. Anything I can help with? I have access to legal documents that might provide context for the business relationships you're examining." The offer sounded helpful, supportive. Exactly what Clara would expect from the woman who'd guided the Sterling family through decades of legal challenges. But now Clara heard the subtle probing, the careful attempt to learn what evidence had been discovered. "That's very thoughtful," Clara replied carefully. "I'll let you know if I need anything." "Of course. And Clara, be careful who you trust. This conspiracy is deeper than any of us imagined. The person behind it could be anyone, even someone we've known for years." The line went dead, leaving Clara staring at evidence that Rita Morrison was exactly the person she'd just warned against trusting. "Do you trust the family's advisors?" The question took on terrifying new meaning as Clara realized the enemy wasn't just inside the Sterling Empire. The enemy was the person who'd helped build it. Rita Morrison had been playing a decades-long game, positioning herself as indispensable while systematically preparing for the family's downfall. And now she knew Clara was getting close to the truth. Clara sat in the pre-dawn darkness of her new office, surrounded by evidence that would destroy one of Philadelphia's most respected legal minds and expose a conspiracy that reached back decades. The weight of discovery pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. Rita Morrison wasn't just a traitor. She was a master architect of destruction who'd spent 22 years earning trust while planning betrayal. Every legal decision, every contract negotiation, every piece of advice she'd given the Sterling family had been calculated to serve her own interests. But proving it would be another matter entirely. Clara's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You're asking the wrong questions. Meet me at Pier 15 in 1 hour. Come alone. A friend. The message could be a trap. It could be Rita Morrison trying to eliminate the one person who'd uncovered her secret. But it could also be someone else with pieces of the puzzle Clara desperately needed. She thought of her daughter Zoe, sleeping peacefully at her sister's house, unaware that her mother was about to walk into potential danger again. Clara had promised herself after the Victor incident that she'd be more careful, more strategic. But some promises were harder to keep than others. At 4:47 a.m., Clara stood on Pier 15, watching the Delaware River reflect the city's lights like scattered diamonds. The early morning air carried the scent of water and possibility, but also the chill of unknown threats. Footsteps echoed on the wooden planks behind her. Clara turned, her hand instinctively moving to the concealed weapon she now carried everywhere. "Agent Rodriguez," she said, recognizing the FBI investigator who'd handled Victor's case. "You sent the message. We've been watching Rita Morrison for 6 months," Rodriguez said without preamble. "Ever since Victor's financial records led us to suspect an inside source. But we needed someone with access to confirm our suspicions." Clara felt relief and anger warring in her chest. "You've been using me as bait. We've been giving you the tools to protect your family," Rodriguez corrected. "Rita Morrison is connected to organized crime families in 3 states. The Sterling attack was just one piece of a larger operation to take control of legitimate businesses through financial manipulation and strategic elimination." The scope of it staggered Clara. "How many other families have been targeted?" 7 that we know of. The Sterlings are the only ones who fought back successfully. Rodriguez's smile was grim. "That's created both opportunity and danger. Morrison's handlers are getting desperate. What happens now?" "Now, we finish what you started. Morrison thinks she's still in control, still pulling the strings. We're going to let her believe that while we build an airtight case." Clara looked out over the water, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. 3 weeks ago, she'd been an invisible maid with a criminal record. Now she was a key to exposing a conspiracy that threatened multiple families and legitimate businesses across several states. "There's something else you need to know," Rodriguez continued. "Morrison has been in contact with people who don't forgive interference. If she realizes you've discovered her identity, your life, and your daughter's life could be in immediate danger." The threat hit Clara like ice water, but it also strengthened her resolve. Elizabeth Sterling had asked her to protect what she couldn't protect herself. That protection now extended far beyond one family. "What do you need from me?" Clara asked. Rodriguez handed her a small device that looked like an ordinary pen. "Recording equipment. Get Morrison to talk about her involvement, her connections, her future plans. We'll handle the rest." As dawn broke over Philadelphia, painting the sky in shades of hope and warning, Clara walked back to her car with the weight of justice on her shoulders. The storm that had begun with Victor's betrayal was far from over. It was just beginning to show its true power. But Clara had learned something important in that darkened study 3 weeks ago. Sometimes courage wasn't about not being afraid. Sometimes courage was about doing what needed to be done despite the fear. Because protecting family, chosen family, beloved family, human family, was worth any risk. The fight for the Sterling legacy would continue, but Clara knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wouldn't face it alone, and she wouldn't lose.